Minions in PoE 2 so far can feel like a tricky archetype to get right. With no dedicated minion ascendancy and only generic minion damage and minion crit scaling nodes on the tree, your options are certainly open, but they might all start to feel the same if you aren't creating your own lines. Meet my AAA battery Legionaire Summoner. As a quick disclaimer, this build is still progressing smoothly through endgame, and I have yet to even achieve my 3rd ascendancy. But after that, I'm even planning a respec, so it's safe to say that this is still a work in progress. But I've created a snapshot of the build and uploaded it to maxroll, and today I'm here to explore those updates with you. The AAA battery Legionaire Summoner lords over an army of skeletal snipers supported by 2 super tanky warriors that are on fire, 2 clerics that heal them, 1 skeletal arsonist, a flame wall that summons exploding raging spirits that blind and slow our foes, and an offering that boosts our entire army's damage and gives them rage. These snipers do loads of DPS with their basic attacks, but their true strength is in shooting gas arrows that spawn gas clouds at our command location. To start off, I rolled Mercenary and rushed out to the closest minion cluster to Merc start on the tree, which is like 20 passives away. I won't lie to you, Merc minion start sucks, but I can't tell how much of that is the game feeling overtuned in general in the early game, or the fact that I don't get my first generic damage scaling on the tree until level 20. Anyways, I actually focused on the Arsonists early game with Popcorn SRS to function as detonator targets. That carried me up until Act 3, where it started to feel sluggish, and I met the new kid on the block, Skeletal Snipers. On release, these puppies fired a gas cloud at your preferred destination for 700% damage. That was nerfed by over 60% of its damage, but it still came out feeling okay, and I'm now clearing endgame with it. I still have a few more obvious upgrades in my 3rd and 4th ascendancy, which should easily net me roughly 30% more damage, and I plan to get capped block with a minimum of 3k HP, in addition to a mesh of armor and evasion, due to Mercenary's location on the tree, to help eventually progress into endgame waystones and get my Uber lab. And now let's take a deeper look at my character. Yeah, I'd like to start off by saying that by just going over my gear and highlighting the fact that I am solo self-found, and this might look a little bit nutty, except for my rings. I think my rings are complete trash, but everything else that I have might look a little bit amazing or even like extremely good or whatever for solo self-found. On my chest piece is also pretty trash. It's kind of not as great as it may seem. For instance, this amulet, this +2 to all spell skills, this doesn't affect minion skills at all because in PoE 2, minions are not spells. Minions are actually just minion gems. That's it. They're minion, and then they get other tags too, like persistent fire detonator for arsonists and my snipers. You'll note persistent physical fire chaos because they're gas cloud and whatnot, but they're not spell skill gems, so they aren't getting a +2 from this. Either way, this is giving me a lot of life. Evasion rating is always nice when you're using evasion rating. Some res is nice too, a little bit of recoup, and the accuracy rating I can't transfer, but there's a node that I was looking at over here that does transfer your dexterity. Foolish of me to forget this, because of course the +2 does scale the wall and the flammability curse, so it's not nothing. I wanted to highlight that, yeah, my gear is what it is, completely solo self-found. Mostly the high life rolls on it are the things that I guess you could look out for. We could still get a +2 on my helm here, but the only thing to really note, in my opinion, that's like super necessary about your gear to make a build like this work is that you are going for life, and that where you can get it, you can find spirit. So chest piece, your amulet, those are 2 great sources for spirit. You can also get it on your scepter. You can roll your scepter for % spirit to get like an extra 40 spirit, or even I think 50 spirit. So that's definitely something to look out for. This scepter is good, but it gets a lot better than this, and I'm even planning to get a scepter. I believe they're called an Omen scepter. I'll probably put a picture up. It's the scepter that gives you malice, which allows you to start crit scaling. If I can get that, that will enable me a well-roll one, mind you, right? I can find any trash one on the ground and throw augments on it, but I'm trying to craft at least a +3 scepter of that variety that has other good juicy stats on it, so that I can transition into a crit variant of this build, because I think that could be dope. If I do that, I will be planning a respec for, if I get that, if I acquire that, I will respec the tree and grab some of the crit nodes, some of these accuracy nodes. We'll have a grand time with that. What are the other important things to note about this build? Oh yeah, I'm using a golden charm of the foliage. It's completely unnecessary. I'm just using this to test rarity in PoE 2. I highly recommend you don't use this and instead use something that will actually keep you alive, because that probably explains a good chunk of my deaths. Also, I think your flasks are important, at least your health flask. In PoE 2, you can actually roll like a meaningful amount of recovery on flasks. Of course, in PoE 1, you could roll like juicy life flasks, but in PoE 2, we're just not reaching the crazy health values that we are in PoE 1 simply because we don't have any life nodes on the tree. And so getting a charm that is like actually defending you and getting a health flask that's just rolled well can do wonders for your build. Like, just look at that life flask. It heals me for 1500 HP. How much health do I have right now? 2500. That's over 60% of my health just healed in one flask in 3 seconds. That's crazy. Even though that's not, you know, what we typically associate. If you're new to ARPGs, especially if you haven't played PoE 1 before, you don't typically associate things like your flasks or even little dinky things like charms, or I guess in PoE 1 they were utility flasks. You might not associate that with your gear super heavily, but it's very important, and I highly recommend you roll these things. The gain charges per second is especially powerful for boss fights. I don't know how powerful it is for a golden charm, but either way, I probably focused too long on this. I noticed that mana is one of those things that you kind of only need enough of to supply your spells when you're casting them. So your mana flask is only as important as that is concerned. I would say really roll this for like a number of charges, because sometimes in a boss fight, I do find myself running low on mana if the fight's particularly drawn out. And that is when things get really awkward, right? When you can't, because you have like a 3-spell rotation that you're really trying to do. This is where I can now beautifully transition into this spell rotations. So your main like damage dealing combo, if you'll call it that, it's kind of like a 1.5 button build. You can kind of just get away with walking up to packs, throwing an offering up, and actually just flame walling. You can just leave it at that, right? And for rares or magic mobs, maybe you'll have to hold your command gas arrow button down. Mine's set to R. But really, actually, just offering and throwing a flame wall down is typically going to be enough. You'll notice, I'm going to kind of bounce back and forth between subjects here. You'll notice when I throw a gas cloud out, look at how insane the spread on these things is. With my setup, you won't often get this big a spread, but just know that if any ignited creature from you, or I think an enemy too, the condition is so easy to meet, as they talked about in the nerf. If any ignited creature, even your flame wall counts. If you ignite an enemy and they walk in, if you put a flame wall down and an enemy walks into it and a gas cloud is over it, this auto attack damage right here gets applied in that entire area that the cloud spreads to. So it's very good clear if it's allowed to spread, but typically it's not allowed to spread, which is why we're going to bounce back and forth here, which is why I highly recommend on the passive tree, you prioritize minion increased area of effect nodes. There are, I think, yeah, there's this wheel that has this notable, and then there's this wheel section of the tree. I just realized it's a skeleton or a zombie. Just like this part is a staff and this part is a mace. What the fuck? That has these small nodes and this notable. Highly recommend you get these. Area of effect is going to do wonders, even for just the immediate. Throw this out. The gas cloud doesn't allow it to expand because you're just using this on a rare. Just getting a little bit of area is going to increase the impact radius of this large enough to hit minions around it. It'll just increase your clear so much. The quality of life for this build goes up significantly if you just get this, right? If you just get this a little amount of area on the tree. What else are we going for? We are mercenary, right? We are a Gemling Legionaire. So we're pathing out on the bottom of the tree, and all the minion nodes, a lot of the juicy ones, are at the top of the tree. So how do we make that work? Well, I theory crafted a right side transition up, right? It is kind of crazy that they took out the middle of the tree and replaced that with every character's ascendancy area, because now we can't path through the tree super efficiently when we're trying to go from one side to the other. So you have to kind of make your own juice out of this. You could lean into evasion a lot more heavily and go the right side of the tree route. That is something I theory crafted. You would probably end up taking different nodes as well. I think you still need to go up here for Lord of Horrors and Right-Handed Darkness. I just think it's too powerful to pass up. But if you're going to go up here, you'd probably even want to lean into Energy Shield maybe a little bit. I don't know. But one thing is for sure, I theory crafted it. You can make it efficient. It's similar number of points. I'd be interested to see how somebody leans into evasion more. Maybe even flash charges gain. I don't know, as like a defensive layer to path up to the right side of the tree and grab some of these minion nodes up here. Because this wheel gets juicy. You get some accuracy. You could probably go crit scaling. Attack and cast speed is really good, especially attack speed for the snipers to just move around. Your warriors are very important. I have mine linked with Infernal Legion, and I have 2 clerics, like I mentioned earlier in the build preview, that are just constantly healing things. And so these Infernal Legion, super tanky, super survivable, very high HP value warriors are just igniting things over time for, look at this, 2,300, 20% of that. So 400 or 500 damage per second. It's pretty good. It's pretty crazy. And of course, they're igniting anything that they're standing next to. So you have an ignite with your flame wall. These guys are igniting anything they stand next to. And you have increased minion area of effect, which does affect that. And then, of course, you have your one arsonist that you slot in to occasionally ignite things. I actually just slot this in also because quite frankly, I haven't found a super good reason for it. I was thinking about putting the ignite on him. Like, he does ignite things sometimes. That's kind of why he's here. You could probably just drop the arsonist. I will say, the original reason I had the arsonist in there was for that. Was for just popping the SRSs, getting big explosions, and trying to scale the ignite damage of that. But it turns out that just focusing on the gas cloud was more damage over time. And I generally don't even have the time now when I'm in combat to be using the command explosive demise between all of the sniper gas clouds that I have to keep firing, because look at how slowly this fires out. And the occasional reactivation of your flame wall, and using your curse, and using an offering. You can see your character's kind of like, you got a lot to do. And on that note, I actually use mobility and arcane tempo in my flame wall just to get this thing out and moving quicker. It's a shame I can't put it on command gas arrow, but of course, you know, if I did that, I would be like nuking my damage. So this is definitely your slowest casting ability that you're going to be spamming the most. And for that, it leaves you pretty vulnerable, I would say. You see the gameplay footage. Just look and imagine, right? Look and imagine when a boss is doing its thing against you. This is what you're doing in retaliation for the majority of the boss fight. So we need to be tanky to allow ourselves to do this to a boss's face, because we're just we're kind of like a caster. It's like you're a minion build, but against a boss, doing this and running around, it's good, but it's not, you're not going to get those big chunks of damage like you saw in the gameplay footage. So we're mostly doing this in combat to enemies with a fire, with any kind of, it's so easy to pop this, so incredibly easy to pop this ignite. But you do want to flame wall up for the added damage that it gives to your snipers. So just literally this and this is going to be the core of your gameplay. Honestly, mapping, again, you're just going to be doing this and running through, right, and throwing your flame wall up. Super simple. And then against bosses, you're just doing this. That's the core of the gameplay loop. Since I've already linked the gem links, my current gear, and tree in the maxroll guide, not sponsored by the way, I think it's better I just cover some key notes about this build before closing out. First, the AAA stands for Archers, Arsonists, and Assholes, as I felt the Raging Spirits linked with blind, maim, and minion instability made for rather annoying assholes. Secondly, I recommend you actually rush enhanced effectiveness over implanted gems on the Ascendancy skill tree. The extra life granted from converting most of your stats into strength and then doubling their passive life granted was worth something to the tune of 700 life for my build, and I even gained mana despite losing over 100 intelligence. Third, make sure you're casting Flame Wall on top of your archers to give them the flat added fire damage. Fourth, I found that Focused Curse is basically a must to ensure your curse hits the targets you cast it on due to the mobility of some bosses. Since curses cost a massive amount of mana, you definitely don't want to miss them in boss fights. So I consider this support gem mandatory for that reason. My fifth key note is that my fifth link for snipers was actually Magnified Effect or increased AoE from PoE 1. And my sixth skill link will probably be Overpower, since this thing stuns like my boy Ebola before he got hit with the Nerf bat.